think, family has always been really important, the work ethic, and we come from farming stock, and that's just instilled in you. And my grandmother lived with us, and you grew up with the stories of, my father was in the Boer War, this happened in the Boer War, this is how we had to survive, and my great-grandfather did this so that you could be here, so there was a lot of sense of pride and a sense of not just taking things for granted. You've got to grind to get somewhere. My father's side of the family, it's another story for another day, but it's an upbringing that has a certain expectation of things being done a certain way. My great uncle was a furniture maker, carpenter and joiner, and he made furniture for the Queen. So there's it just runs through you that things are done a certain way and to a certain standard, and you don't just do it so it's okay to get by. You do it so it lasts. You do it well. My uncle had a big workshop. My grandfather had a workshop. It's what you do. Yeah. My father, he was the military attaché down in South Africa. He did a lot of portrait photography, fashion photography, so he became very well known out there. Did a lot of advertising for a lot of the people around at the time. Once I came along, he slowed that down and he got into retail, so he looked after the equivalent of Dixon's in the old days, but not Dixon's. It was slightly better than that. It was more high-end. And they had a load of branches, so he looked after that. I made my first money at school, funny enough. I still to this day don't understand why people, but I guess it's just human nature. I'd go to the sweet shop in the morning and I'd buy sweets, because you used to be able to buy them by weight. And I'd then take them to school, and at the breaks and lunch I'd sell them to people, because we didn't have a tuck shop and we didn't have shops near us or anything. And what I didn't understand is people would say, tomorrow I'd like bonbons, or it's like, why can't you go yourself and bring your own in? That's how I made my early money. So I do the milk round before school with the milkman. I'd help him out. He'd give me a bacon sandwich and a pint of Gold Top, which people know, but it's basically cream. And I'd then cycle 5 miles to school, and then I'd come home, I'd cycle home, and I'd do a paper round, and that's how I made my first money. I don't think I had any particular ideas of what I wanted to do. There was no internet, there was none of that sort of stuff, so there was no, I want to be an influencer or a football player or whatever, And back then you had Mozambique and Angola, and things weren't right, and boys didn't come back. You'd go to church on a Sunday and you would have a service that sent off the latest batch of boys to the front, and they were boys. They were 18, 19, and even now I can feel the emotion of that as a kid, and knowing, and the funerals, and it wasn't a question of doing national service and having a jolly down at the coast in the Navy and coming back a year later. People didn't come back. One of my uncles had done national service and actually stayed, and actually was in the Special Forces. He was always telling his stories and regaling us, which as a kid you think is really exciting. But obviously for my mother it's quite hairy, and we could see that things were changing, they could see things were changing, and I think they were like, actually we have the opportunity to go to the UK because of my father's passport, and so they took the opportunity. It was really hard. I mean, it was, England back then was not quite what it is now. Foreign people were hard to come by. And so I was bullied quite badly. It was the era of apartheid and all the free Mandela and don't eat South African grapes and all that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of, my parents say that you have slaves, my parents say that we don't eat your food. I'm 14. I've got nothing to do with it. And I didn't understand what they were saying. I don't understand what you mean you can't eat our fruit. So it was quite and it was the Falklands, just after the Falklands War, and the South Africans had sold weapons to the Argentinians, some of which sank some of the ships. Obviously that's my fault as well. So I was an RG lover. I'm sure we won't use that bit, but yeah, just yeah, kids can be cruel. I think I had to knuckle down. I think I had to find ways to prove myself. Took up the sport called football and found ways to be accepted, I think. And I think sport really was where I got accepted, because people couldn't deny when you're winning, and well, we'd like him to represent the school. And my father had a job to come to, working at a place called Wallace Heaton, which was in Bond Street, and again it was still in the photography field, but it was very high end. So he dealt with the rich, the famous, the royals, everyone from Elton John to ABBA to the Duke of Westminster, Prince Charles, Prince Andrew, those sort of people that he dealt with. He had to sign the Official Secrets Act, because back then you developed film. You didn't have, what you do now. So that was the sort of world that he was in. So he came and did that because of his connections and background there. So he'd travel up to London every day. Yeah. He's got these big folders that you can open, and there's prints and negatives and slides as well. And we have slideshows every now and then. And yeah, that's all there. I was in the darkroom with him from, I must have been, 6, 7, 8, and I'd talk to customers, and I'd take the film and I'd write the name down on a piece of paper. And so I was really involved, and I'd be in the darkroom and watch. In the old days, you used to have just this piece of white paper that you put into the drink, and you just agitate it, and slowly this image appears, and it's like magic. So I didn't do A levels. I did an HND instead. So I went to technical college, which I don't know if it even exists anymore. But yeah, I went to technical college rather than doing A levels, because I again wanted to be hands-on. I wanted to do stuff. So I did applied A level chemistry, because it was an application for what we were doing. So I did that, and then I did an HND as well at the same time, which was equivalent to 3 A levels. So the HND was restoring antiques, and I specialised in books. So chemical compositions, chemicals, what they do to things, how to fix things, how to undo things. Yeah. I'd spent a bit of time at Sangorski and Sutcliffe, which were the people that bound the original Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, which went on the Titanic. It was the most expensive book in the world at the time. It was inlaid with gems and really a work of art. It was an incredible place to go and to be around people and design and attention to detail and that sort of stuff. And so I did an HND specialising in restoration of antiques, antique books, bookbinding, all that sort of stuff. Working with gold lettering, leathers, designing things, whatever people want kind of thing. Yeah, that really got me. I loved that. So my mum, because of not fitting in and being bullied, was trying to find things to keep me occupied. And there was a adult education course locally where this bloke did a thing called bookbinding. None of us had ever heard of it. So I went along, and I just connected. I could design and make what was in my head, and I could push the boundaries and go, well, what if we make it out of this, and what if we do that? And he'd go, well, I don't know, no one's done that, or I suppose so, and it just, fortunately, then in Guildford, there was a course that was being run by a woman who was internationally renowned, and the only other course was in Switzerland. So just chance on chance, really. So that's very much the world, yeah. That is very much the world. So I was in a class with people that were in their 30s and 40s, and I was 18. I did very well, but when it came to somebody giving me their £10,000 book, do you give an 18-year-old a £10,000 book, or do you give the 40-year-old the £10,000 book? I can do the job better, but I just don't fit the bill. So I didn't really fit the bill as such. I had to find ways of earning money doing other things that maybe didn't fit that bill but still used the skills. And so I did a bit of that, but that's where the photography then started coming. And it's like, okay, how can I start to make some money? I could never quite make it work for me, because I went sort of down the sport route, and it was just as there was the advent of Associated Press and Getty and that sort of thing. They had millions to throw at it, and it didn't sort of work. But I made a living out of it for a period of time on the side. But I did have my own darkroom, and I still appreciate photography, and will do it when I have the time. Yeah. My dad, he did the photography, but he'd always been handy. He then stopped working in London because it was quite a commute, and I think we were now of an age, and so it was just, what does he do to find a new career? So he started getting into the handyman sort of thing, which then led to more decorating. So he then ended up doing the decorating, and that's kind of where he stayed. So at sort of 15, 16, I'd be helping him putty Georgian windows, and he'd show me how to putty, which most people don't even know how to do anymore because everything's UPVC. But yeah, so that's, I'd be doing that on the side, helping him out. But yeah, that's kind of what he did, and that's where he stayed. Yeah. I was working for my dad because I was in my teens, late teens. I was at college, so I was doing that, and then I got a Saturday job and I did retail. So I got into high-end shoes, so Russell Bromley, Kurt Geiger, yeah, high-end shoes rather than your sort of run-of-the-mill stuff. They kept offering me more and more hours, and so I did more and more, but whilst juggling the other bits on the side. And in the end, they said, "We'd like you to come up to London." So I went up to London to Harrods, and we had 12 departments in Harrods, specialising in men's, sport, design, different designer, women's, that kind of thing. And they asked me to run them, basically. So I went and ran the 12 departments in Harrods. And those were the old days of famous and rich people coming in. I remember them closing off our department where we were because the King of Thailand came in. And so I sat with the King of Thailand, and, do you like this pair, that pair, what belt do you think goes? And again, this was the times of crocodile belts and ostrich belts, and everything was, far more acceptable. And ladies would leave their fur coats in the fur deposit and go shopping, and so a lot of very interesting people around, and a lot of money to be made. Yeah, I think it's about doing it right, doing it well, about things lasting, where you want things to be right, be good. The people you get to see, the people you get to meet, back then it was quite something. You're standing there and Richard Gere walks past. It's a different world. You get asked, you need to sort out a pair of shoes because somebody wants a particular pair of shoes. It's a pair of shoes for Lady Diana. It's not a world that is around really anymore. Yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I think thinking out of the box was a big thing. I think they gave me a role which hadn't been done before, and they said, make it work, and I guess being a people person, just being able to connect with 12 different sets of departments and managers and staff and sort of make it work. Customer focus, being able to listen to the customer, nothing's ever a problem, which is really what came from Harrods for me. The customer's always right. You always have to, because at this level, you just need to find a solution. Yeah, to be able to sit with royalty, A-list celebrities, and make them feel at ease and don't fawn over them and treat them as normal people. They appreciate, you get more out of it, and yeah, I think it absolutely set me up for life. So the Harrods group was Harrods, Kurt Geiger, Turnbull and Asser, Carvela. They had a number of brands under that umbrella. And one of them, Kurt Geiger, they said, look, they've got the head office in Bond Street. We need somebody to get into procurement. We like what you're doing. Do you want a shot at it? Back then it meant I didn't need to work weekends, bank holidays, and I was like, yeah, I think I could fancy a bit of this. I'm now in my early 20s, and yeah, why not? And so I did. And so I worked in Bond Street, which again at that time was an incredible place to be. And I got into procurement. So initially doing all the boring stuff, shoe polishes and being responsible for shoe trees and those kind of things. And it progressed. My boss, again, was brought in to sort things out. And he was very open to somebody like me who was looking to go places and had new ideas. And they said to me, look, we've got all of this stock sitting in these warehouses from different seasons, because in the high-end fashion, the colours are always changing, designs are changing, and people don't want last seasons. And so you sit on this stuff, which is still decent, but it's just people are wanting the next thing. So we now have lots of these designer outlet villages and factory outlets and stuff. So the very first one in this country was actually done up in Cheshire Oaks. So I would travel up to Cheshire Oaks and watched it being built, and then I had to go into the warehouse and choose the stock that would fit it out for the launch, and it needed to be stuff that would sell, and I had to decide what price it would go at to still pull us back in money, but still get rid of it. And so that was great, and we did it, and it was really successful, and they built more. So Bicester Village, I think is your closest one here. Because it's so successful, we cleared out the warehouse, and then they were like, this is actually becoming a cash cow. This is actually very interesting. So I then started buying from people like Timberland and Adidas and Nike, all of the stuff that they had left over. So Timberland, you'd say to them, what have you got? And they'd say, well, we've got 10 pairs of size 8 of this boot and 6 pairs in. I'd go, okay, well, I'll have all of them, or I'd have this and I'll have that. And so I started buying and putting it into the shops. And in the end, we were going to some of the shoe manufacturers and saying, we want you to produce us some shoes to sell in these shops that we'd sell in our normal shops, but when it came to sale time, we could then discount them. So yeah, logistics and procurement is kind of where I got to, yeah. So in fashion, you'll have 2 changes a year, spring, summer, and autumn, winter. And so like now, they would be already buying and planning and doing spring, summer for next year. I had a headhunter phone me one day and say, we hear about what you're doing. We've got a business that needs input. This business needs help in the seasonal department, just to bring your expertise, because there's a lot of money tied up, things aren't right, we need to change things. So I said, yeah, cool, let's do it. They doubled my salary overnight. Got a company car and moved out of London and went to work for a company called B&Q, which was nothing like high-end fashion. No famous people. So yeah, bit of a change. I moved through the ranks quite quickly. Things went very well for me, and I think it was about the challenge, but also there was a lot of money. I mean, I doubled my salary pretty much every year for a while. And then there was bonuses, and yeah, things became very good. Because B&Q was just becoming this monster and was just growing when I joined them phenomenally. The buyers were just buying stuff and not being held to account. So the next year, how do we buy less? Do we buy it from places where, if it's selling well, we can order more quickly and get it on shorter lead times? And if we're buying from Bolivia, bought a lot of furniture from Bolivia and Vietnam and South Africa, is there a way that we could stagger it, and if it's not selling, cancel any future orders? And it was those sort of things that brought in that saved them a lot of money. Fast forward, my last role before I left, I did all of the European tenders, because B&Q bought Castorama, which was the equivalent in France. And it was like, well, you buy white paint, we buy white paint, let's buy white paint together. But you were talking about big volumes, and who can cope, and actually is it the best strategy for one factory to have it? Because if they burn down, and so it's a lot more of that, so logistics and procurement kind of side by the time I then left. By the time I left B&Q, I'd been married and I'd had 2 kids, and I was then going through a divorce. I'd left B&Q to spend time with the kids, and I gave it all up so that I could pick up the kids from school, drop the kids at school, see the kids, because now we were in separate houses and I didn't want to be travelling, and I needed to focus on just dealing with the dearth of stuff. Having come from the background that I did, where there was money and glamour and people and famous people and lots of stuff, and then you hit hard times when you get divorced, and you're driving a van, that's all you're doing. You're literally driving a van to deliver something. I was delivering big items, so it wasn't like Amazon. It was you drive to Manchester and drop this valve and then drive home, and that's kind of what I did, and you were earning a pittance. I did that, and I have to say, we talk about low points, that was a low point, to have to take a deep breath and go, the bloke who is the warehouse supervisor, I can do his job a day a week standing on my head, but I can't tell him that. I need to just go, yes, of course, yeah, no problem. I'm looking at the warehouse going, that can be organised differently, that can be done better. I'm running multiple sites. I know I'm shipping stuff in from all around the world, and I've just got to go, yep, you want me to drive to, yeah, no problem. And I'd get in my crappy van, my little Luton van, and go wherever and do whatever, and come back and tip my hat and say thank you for my meagre wage. Very humbling and a very, very big pill to swallow. But I did it knowing where I needed to get to, and it was for a season just to get me through. I think one of the first things which I learned then and has stuck with me is there are people that are the salt of the earth. There are people that, you'd come back early and I had to buy myself a banger just to get around, and the brakes needed changing, and I couldn't afford to go to the garage and get them changed, and the guys were like, oh, we'll do it now lunchtime. I was like, really? He said, yeah, buy these, go to Halfords, get that, come back, and then the three of them were changing my brake pads for free in their lunchtime. Things like that have stuck with me, where you go, actually, there are good people around. There are good people where they'll just help you out. And it's usually the people that don't have money that are prepared to give you their last sandwich. They're prepared to help out and go, it doesn't matter, it's not a problem. And as my journey has gone, I want to be able to be one of those people that goes, yeah, we can fix that, we can do that. Do you know what I mean? It has stuck with me, and to this day I'll do things just because. Somebody contacted me on Facebook the other day and said, we've got a bed and it's damaged and we need it because we've got a family member coming to stay. Is that the sort of thing you repair? I can't find anyone. I said, yeah, drop it at the workshop, and I repaired it, and it wasn't a big problem. What do I owe you? You don't owe me anything because it's such a tiny thing. And then she sent me a photo of the bed put together and, it all dressed, and you kind of go, yeah, it's okay to be doing that, I've been afforded the ability to do it as well now. But also I know how desperate you can be. And so to be able to be on the receiving end when you're that desperate, to be able to give when people are that desperate, yeah. I'm sitting in my van for hours every day going, what can I do? What can I do? I ain't going to be doing this forever. What can I do that's going to define my own destiny, that if I work hard, I earn money, and if I don't work hard, then I don't earn money, rather than just come in, punch a clock, and I just couldn't do that. So I started doing some bits with my dad again, and just he'd help me out, and I'd do it a couple of days here and a couple of days there. And again, very quickly, it was like, yeah, but if we did that, we could do that. And people would say to him, could you do this? And you say, no, I'm very happy doing this. And I say, yeah, but if we got someone else, and if I stood there and you did, yeah, we could do it. Why don't you say yes? And he was very clear. He was saying no, because at this stage he was most probably in his early 60s, most probably, and he was very happy. Just Mrs. Jones wants her bathroom doing, and she wants her kitchen doing, and when you do them doesn't matter, and come in and have a cup of tea, and that's great, but it's not inside me. There's just, I'm always like, yeah, but we could, what about, and so it very quickly, we sort of then diverged, and he'd do all the smaller stuff, and anything big came along, he'd give me. And then it became, well, can you wallpaper a ceiling? And yes, of course we can. And I'd just keep saying yes, and I'd either draw on his expertise, or I'd learn it, or find people who could do those things, just never saying no, just so I could build a business and grow it. And it's now at the point where he comes and he works for me a few days a month, and he doesn't really do his own stuff anymore, and we're doing the toilet, the kitchen, as well as the stately home.